I am sitting in my car right now, hands trembling as I stare at the text message from my husband, Marcus. Three words that just shattered my entire world. I know everything. My heart is pounding so hard I can barely breathe. I never meant for this to happen. The affair with Jake was supposed to be just someone to talk to someone who actually listened when I felt invisible in my own marriage. But now Marcus knows, and I can see our 8-year-old son Ethan's bedroom light still on through our kitchen window. I thought I was just trying to feel alive again, after 2 years of feeling like a ghost in my own home. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And if you have ever felt trapped in your own life, hit that like button, because this story is about fighting for what matters most. Subscribe if you want to hear how far a mother will go to protect her child. Walking through our front door felt like entering a courtroom where I was already found guilty. Marcus sat at our kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. The screen glowed with a photograph that made my stomach drop to the floor. There I was, clear as day, kissing Jake in the parking garage of our office building. Marcus did not say a single word. He just sat there staring at me with eyes so cold and empty that I barely recognized the man I married 9 years ago. I tried to speak, tried to explain, but what could I possibly say? The evidence was right there in high definition color. Marcus remained completely silent, which was somehow more terrifying than if he had started screaming immediately. I could hear the faint sound of Ethan's video game coming from upstairs, and I thanked God that our son was safely in his room, completely unaware that his entire world was about to crumble beneath his feet. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. I stood there in our entryway, still wearing the same clothes from the photograph, feeling like a stranger in the home we had built together. Every family photo on the walls seemed to be staring at me with judgment. The kitchen, where we had shared countless breakfast conversations, where Ethan had taken his first steps, where we had planned our future together, now felt like a crime scene. Finally, Marcus spoke, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "How long, Harper? How long have you been lying to my face every single day?" The pain in his voice cut through me like a knife. I wanted to lie to minimize it, to make it seem like nothing. But looking at his broken expression, I knew I owed him the truth no matter how much it would hurt. I told him everything. 3 months. It started when Marcus began working until 9 or 10 every night, coming home exhausted and distant. I felt like I was living with a roommate instead of a husband. Jake and I were assigned to the same project at work, and he was the first person in months who actually asked me how I was doing and waited to hear the answer. It began as innocent conversations over coffee, then turned into lunch meetings that ran longer than they should have. The first kiss happened after Marcus forgot our wedding anniversary, and Jake sent me flowers with a note saying he was sorry my husband did not appreciate me. As I explained all of this, I watched Marcus transform into someone I had never seen before. His face turned red, then purple. He stood up so quickly that his chair fell backward and crashed against the tile floor. For the first time in our marriage, I was actually afraid of him. Marcus had never raised his voice to me, let alone shown any signs of violence. But the man standing in front of me was not my husband. This was a stranger consumed by rage and betrayal. He started shouting, using words I had never heard him say before. He called me names that made me flinch, accused me of destroying our family, of ruining Ethan's childhood. I tried to explain that I felt abandoned in our marriage, that I had begged him for months to spend more time with us, to put his phone down during dinner, to remember that he had a wife and son who needed him. But Marcus was past the point of listening to explanations. He was in full attack mode, and I was the enemy. The worst part was watching him grab picture frames off the mantel and throw them across the room. Our wedding photo shattered against the wall, glass scattered across the hardwood floor we had refinished together the previous summer. The sound of breaking glass mixed with his angry shouting created a chaos I had never experienced in our normally peaceful home. I kept glancing toward the stairs, praying that Ethan was wearing his headphones and could not hear his parents' marriage exploding beneath his feet. Marcus began demanding details that I refused to give him. He wanted to know every place Jake and I had been together, every conversation, every intimate moment. I told him I would not put either of us through that torture, which only made him angrier. He accused me of protecting Jake, of still caring more about my lover than my own family. The conversation spiraled into territory that felt dangerous and destructive, with both of us saying things designed to inflict maximum pain rather than seek understanding or resolution. What happened next still haunts me every single day. Marcus started threatening to take Ethan away from me permanently. He said he would hire the best divorce attorney in the state and make sure I never saw our son again. He told me that once Ethan found out what kind of mother he had, our boy would never want to speak to me anyway. The threats felt very real and panic started setting in. I could feel my carefully constructed life slipping away from me and I was powerless to stop it. Marcus continued his verbal assault, telling me that Ethan would grow up knowing his mother was a cheater who destroyed their family. He painted a picture of our son's future that was filled with shame and disappointment, all because of my selfish actions. I knew he was right about some things. I had made terrible choices that would impact Ethan for the rest of his life. But hearing Marcus weaponize our child against me triggered something deep and desperate inside my chest. I lost control completely. The words came pouring out of my mouth before I could stop them, fueled by months of feeling unheard and unloved, combined with the terror of losing my son. I screamed back at Marcus with a venom I did not know I possessed. "You know what I regret marrying you." The words hung in the air like poison gas, but I was not finished. The floodgates had opened, and everything I had been holding back came rushing out in the most destructive way possible. Marcus froze completely when I said those words. For a moment, the house fell silent, except for the sound of both of us breathing heavily. I should have stopped there. I should have taken back what I had just said and tried to find some way to repair the damage. Instead, in my desperation and rage, I said the most unforgivable thing a mother could ever say. "I regret not aborting Ethan so I would not be trapped with you forever." The moment those words left my lips, I knew I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The look of absolute horror on Marcus's face told me that I had just destroyed whatever small chance we might have had at working through this crisis. But the worst part was not Marcus's reaction. The worst part was the soft sound of crying that came from the stairway behind me. I turned around to see my 8-year-old son standing on the stairs in his Superman pajamas, clutching his favorite teddy bear. His face was streaked with tears, and his brown eyes, so much like his father's, were filled with a pain that no child should ever have to experience. Ethan had heard every word of our fight, including my horrible statement about wishing he had never been born. "Mommy," he whispered in a voice so small and broken that it shattered what was left of my heart. "You wished I was never born." The innocent confusion in his question made everything so much worse. This was not just about Marcus and me anymore. Our 8-year-old son now believed that his own mother regretted his existence, that his birth had somehow trapped me in a life I did not want. I ran toward Ethan, desperate to take back my words to explain that I did not mean what I had said, but as I reached for him, my son stepped backward away from me. The rejection in that small gesture felt like being stabbed in the chest. Ethan had never pulled away from my hugs before. He had always been a mama's boy, the one person in our house who still seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with me. Instead of coming to me for comfort, Ethan ran straight to Marcus, wrapping his small arms around his father's waist. Through his tears, my son looked up at his dad and asked, "Daddy, can we go to Grandma's house? I do not want to stay here anymore." Marcus looked down at our boy, then back at me with an expression of pure disgust and contempt. "You just lost your son, Harper. I hope Jake was worth it." Marcus went upstairs and quickly packed a bag for himself and Ethan. I followed them, begging and pleading, trying to explain to Ethan that Mommy did not mean what she said, that sometimes adults say horrible things when they are angry and scared. But Ethan would not even look at me. He kept his face buried against his father's shoulder while Marcus packed his favorite toys and enough clothes for several days. As they prepared to leave, I made one last desperate attempt to reach my son. I knelt down to his eye level and tried to apologize, but Ethan shook his head and whispered, "You said you did not want me, Mommy. Why would you say that if you did not mean it?" I had no answer for him. How do you explain adult rage and desperation to an 8-year-old? How do you take back words that have already poisoned his innocent heart? Marcus carried their bags to the car while Ethan walked beside him, still refusing to acknowledge my presence. I stood in our doorway watching my husband and son drive away into the darkness, knowing that I had just destroyed the two most important relationships in my life with a few moments of uncontrolled anger. The house felt impossibly empty and quiet after they left. I was completely alone for the first time in 9 years, surrounded by the wreckage of broken picture frames and shattered dreams. The next 3 days were the longest 72 hours of my entire life. Marcus had taken Ethan to his mother's house across town, and despite my constant phone calls and text messages, neither of them would respond to me. I left voicemail after voicemail, each one more desperate than the last, begging for just a chance to explain myself to my son. I sent text messages apologizing, promising to go to counseling, offering to do whatever it took to make things right. All of my messages went unanswered. I barely slept during those 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see Ethan's heartbroken face asking me why I said I did not want him. I could hear the pain in his voice when he asked if I really wished he was never born. The guilt was eating me alive from the inside out. I had spent 8 years being Ethan's primary caretaker, the one who kissed his scraped knees and read him bedtime stories, and I had thrown it all away in 30 seconds of pure rage. My relationship with Jake ended immediately. When he called to check on me after hearing through office gossip that Marcus and I were having problems, I told him we could never speak again. What we had shared was not worth losing my son. Jake tried to convince me that we could work something out, that maybe this was actually an opportunity for me to finally leave my marriage and be happy. But I realized that what I thought was love was really just loneliness and the excitement of feeling desired again after years of being taken for granted. On the fourth day, my desperation drove me to make a decision that I now recognize as completely irrational. I knew that Ethan was still attending school, so I drove to Lincoln Elementary and waited in the parking lot. My plan was simple. I would wait for recess or dismissal and try to talk to my son to explain that mommy made a terrible mistake and that I loved him more than anything in the world. When I finally spotted Ethan on the playground during morning recess, my heart leaped with relief and hope. He looked so small playing on the swings by himself, while other children ran around the jungle gym. I parked my car and walked quickly across the playground toward my son, calling his name. But when Ethan saw me approaching, the reaction was not what I had hoped for. Instead of running into my arms, he looked terrified and immediately started running toward the school building. "Baby, wait!" I called after him, breaking into a run myself. "Mommy just wants to talk to you. I can explain everything." But Ethan was faster than I expected, and he reached the safety of the building before I could catch up to him. A security guard appeared at the doors, having been alerted by my son's obvious distress. I tried to explain that I was Ethan's mother and just wanted to speak with my child, but the guard informed me that I needed to go through proper channels and make an appointment with the principal's office. Principal Wilson came out to meet with me in the parking lot. She was a kind woman who had always been supportive of our family, but even she seemed uncomfortable with the situation. She explained that Marcus had already been in touch with the school and had requested that I not be allowed to pick up Ethan or have any unsupervised contact with him during school hours. She suggested that I work things out with my husband through proper legal channels rather than approaching my son at school. When I refused to leave immediately and kept insisting that I just needed 5 minutes to apologize to my child, Principal Wilson had no choice but to call the police. I was not arrested, but Officer Rodriguez gave me a stern warning about respecting the school's policies and my husband's wishes regarding our son. He suggested that I contact a family attorney if I wanted to establish formal visitation rights, but he made it clear that showing up at Ethan's school unannounced was not acceptable behavior. The humiliation of being escorted off my son's school property by a police officer was almost unbearable. Other parents stared at me as I walked back to my car, probably wondering what kind of terrible mother gets banned from her own child's school. I sat in my car in the parking lot for another hour, hoping to catch another glimpse of Ethan. But the security guard kept watching me through the windows, making it clear that I was not welcome. In my complete desperation, I made another decision that I immediately regretted. I called 911 and reported that Marcus had kidnapped our son. I told the dispatcher that my husband had taken our child and was refusing to let me see him. Within 20 minutes, two police cars showed up at Marcus's mother's house, prepared to investigate a possible abduction case. Of course, Marcus was able to quickly prove that he had not kidnapped anyone. He showed the officers documentation, proving that he was Ethan's father and had every legal right to have his son with him. When they contacted me to follow up, Officer Martinez explained that making false reports was a serious offense and that I could face charges if I continued to misuse emergency services. The whole incident only made Marcus more angry and more determined to keep Ethan away from me. Sitting in my empty house that night, I finally began to understand the full scope of what I had done. I had not just cheated on my husband or said horrible things in anger. I had systematically destroyed every relationship that mattered to me through a series of increasingly desperate and irrational decisions. I was alone because I had driven everyone away through my own actions, and no amount of blame or excuses could change that reality. The road to healing began with a phone call to Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist whose name I found through an online search for saving relationships after infidelity. During our first session, I expected her to help me figure out how to get Marcus to forgive me and bring Ethan home. Instead, she helped me realize that my focus needed to be on understanding why I had made such destructive choices and how I could become the kind of person who deserved to be in my son's life again. Dr. Chen was not interested in hearing me blame Marcus for working too much or Jake for pursuing me when I was vulnerable. She made it clear that I was the only person responsible for my actions and that real healing could not begin until I stopped making excuses and started taking full accountability. It was painful work, examining all the ways I had contributed to the problems in my marriage and the terrible moment when I had lashed out at my innocent child. Through our sessions, I began to understand that my affair was not really about Jake, or even about feeling neglected by Marcus. It was about my own insecurity and my inability to communicate effectively when I felt disconnected from my husband. Instead of having honest conversations about our relationship problems or suggesting marriage counseling, I had chosen to seek validation from someone else. I had taken the easy path that required no difficult conversations or personal growth, and it had led to disaster. I also started writing letters to Ethan every single day, even though I knew I could not send them to him. Dr. Chen suggested this as a way to process my feelings and practice taking responsibility without expecting immediate forgiveness. In these letters, I apologized for my terrible words and explained that sometimes adults say things they do not mean when they are scared and angry. I told him about all the wonderful memories I had of his childhood and how proud I was to be his mother despite what I had said in that horrible moment. After 6 months of intensive therapy and personal work, Marcus finally agreed to allow me to see Ethan under supervised conditions. The family court had ordered counseling for all three of us, and our first meeting took place in Dr. Chen's office with both parents present. Ethan was polite but distant, answering my questions with short responses and avoiding eye contact. When I tried to apologize for what I had said that terrible night, he simply nodded without commenting. Recovery was not instant or magical. It took many months of supervised visits, family therapy sessions, and consistent proof that I was committed to being a better person before Ethan began to trust me again. Marcus remained cold and distant, but he gradually became willing to co-parent effectively for our son's sake. Our marriage was over and we both knew it, but we learned to work together as divorced parents who shared the same goal of raising a healthy, happy child. The most important lesson I learned through this entire experience was that anger can destroy everything you love in a matter of seconds if you let it control you. The words I spoke in rage took years to repair, and some relationships never fully recovered. I also learned that feeling neglected or unappreciated in a marriage does not justify betraying your family's trust. There are always better options than infidelity, even when they require difficult conversations and hard work. Today, Ethan and I have rebuilt our relationship, though it will never be exactly what it was before that terrible night. He is now 13 years old, and we have honest conversations about what happened when he was 8. He has forgiven me, but he also learned important lessons about how adults should handle their problems. Some mistakes cannot be undone, but the love between a mother and child is worth fighting for, even when you are fighting against yourself. What do you think about second chances when it comes to family relationships? Have you ever said something in anger that you immediately regretted? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let me know if you believe people can truly change after making terrible mistakes. If this story resonated with you or taught you something about the power of words, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real life stories about overcoming our worst moments. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that redemption is possible, even after we have hurt the people we love most. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that tomorrow is always a chance to be better than we were yesterday.